Hello and welcome to the special Independence Day edition of The Big Picture with me, Ishan Russell. Today we focus on what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said from the ramparts of the Red Fort on the 70th Independence Day. And he did speak about a range of issues in a speech that lasted an hour and a half, some rather surprising, like the reference to the human rights abuses in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Balochistan, to expected issues such as the implementation of the GST, to messages driven towards poll-bound states such as Uttar Pradesh and Punjab. So what are the major takeaways from the Prime Minister's address and how will they impact policy in the coming days? To answer these questions, I am joined by Sudesh Verma, spokesperson of the BJP, Tom Vadakkan, spokesperson of the Congress Party, Aditi Phadnis, political editor at the Business Standard, and Vinod Sharma, political editor at the Hindustan Times. Vinod, I'll start with you. The reference to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Balochistan, was it expected during an Independence Day address, and does it mean that it's a strategic shift in how we are approaching Pakistan, a very aggressive, the gloves are off kind of approach?
I wonder whether it is a strategy. I see it as a tactics. You see, in recent days, what has happened is that Pakistan has raised the pitch on certain use of force in the valley, which has led to many injuries and deaths. And Pakistan has revived its campaign in the United Nations. They wrote a letter, their Prime Minister wrote a letter to Ban Ki-moon, and there was also a letter done to the UN Human Rights Commission, and there has been a request from the UN Human Rights Commission to visit our side of Kashmir, which Indian government has rejected. So, in response to that, I view it, in my very personal view, though many security experts disagree with me, my own view is that this is an effective riposte to Pakistan, which is seeking to emerge a defender of human rights vis-a-vis the developments on our side of Kashmir. This is an effort to deny Pakistan the moral high ground on the issue that in your own country, what is the state of human rights?
Right.
In Balochistan, if you know, there has been this issue of missing persons. The Supreme Court of Pakistan has taken up that issue, and there are protests every second day.
Right.
There are attacks every second day in Balochistan. The POK, there too, the status of human rights is abysmal. And what to talk of northern areas, especially Gilgit and Baltistan, where subnationalism is sought to be dumbed down or put down through promotion of religio-political outfits in that area.
All right.
So, Pakistan is sought to be put on the defensive. India is seeking to blunt the Pakistani campaign on the human rights question in the valley by raising these issues. Now, whether this will succeed or not, it is anybody's guess. In my personal view, this has to be buttressed by a degree of unilateralism by way of reaching relief to the people in Kashmir, on our side of Kashmir.
Right.
After the noises, the positive noises which have been made recently with regard to co-opting them to mainstream, asking them to shun violence and hold laptops
so
and
domestic
computers
issues,
rather than other things in their hands.
Domestic issues as well have to be addressed. But Tom, does the opposition stand with the Prime Minister on this particular issue?
See, it's a big, broad canvas that the Prime Minister is ushered in. Primarily because if you look at it, you must understand that on the 14th, there was the address from in Pakistan. And the agenda was set there, the attack on Kashmir, and followed by the envoy's reaction in Delhi.
Right.
Now, those are the circumstances and the backdrop in which the Prime Minister has set the agenda here. But this is basically, he has taken the bait. Now, the subcontinent has huge problems, whether it's in Pakistan or in India. In Pakistan, the whole issue is they have a constituency that they are addressing. And that is a failed state. There you have to have diversionary tactics. But here, India is a different state of affairs. We have problems. We have promises that have been made. An agenda has been set in the manifesto. We had the Prime Minister inviting all head of states from different countries who came here when he was sworn in. All that apart, the question of relationship with neighbors have been a big failure. Now, he's addressed this and he's taken it to a different level. We are with the government, with the Prime Minister on issues wherever there are issues of national security, national integrity, we are with him. But we have a problem with his unsteady foreign policy.
All right.
Today he is there, today he is from Afghanistan, he moves to straight, he addresses them and tells them what? That terrorism is a major problem till terrorism is sorted out from Pakistan. And where does he go? He goes to Pakistan. Now, this is an unbalanced state of foreign affairs. As long as the foreign policy remains steady, consistent, this is what we are asking for.
Oh. All right, so foreign policy should remain consistent. It certainly is a departure from how presently, especially towards Pakistan, Aditi, the foreign policy was geared towards. But in terms of a larger message from the Prime Minister's address, many are saying that earlier, in the earlier speeches, there was a lot of talk about his pet schemes, schemes such as Swachh Bharat, Make in India, Digital India. This time, all that took a back seat. It wasn't about that. It was more about foreign policy adventure, as one analyst was calling it.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a foreign policy adventure. This was a speech that is supposed to have been prepared by a lot of inputs by ordinary common people. So I'm assuming that the 20% hike in pension of freedom fighters, for instance, or the kind of tentative health insurance scheme that the contours of which we are yet to see, subject to 1 lakh rupees. Those things will be fleshed out, and I guess those are inputs which he's got from ordinary people. Other than that, it was a kind of a review of 2 years of his government. So the things that he has done, he also reached out to the opposition. It's not that he attacked the opposition in that sense.
He congratulated everybody for
Quite
GST.
right. GST, as well as said that on many things we are not going to drop what the opposition has initiated. We are going to continue with many of those schemes. So he gave credit where it was due. I don't agree that his speech, that his foreign policy is unbalanced or is kind of quixotic. I think he has a plan which is in his head, and I think many players are feeling upset because the traditional ways of foreign policy, you give me something, I give you something, what have I got? Unilateralism is not something that is accepted by the foreign policy establishment. This Prime Minister has shown exemplary courage, particularly in Pakistan, to reach out and unilaterally give concessions, to put out a hand of friendship, etc. I think he has to be given full credit for that.
All right, fair enough. Sudesh Verma, the Prime Minister getting full credit for what he's taking forward in terms of foreign policy. But the other points that I mentioned about, for example, the economic front, he did mention GST, he did mention the fact that there's been more inclusion, also about the fact that as far as corruption is concerned, no major corruption scam has mired his government. But in terms of real forward-looking policy, it's, as Aditi was saying, more a review of the performance of the past 2 years, wasn't it?
You see, this time there was slight difference in the sense that people wanted to know that how the PMO is functioning, what is the philosophy behind the decisions taken. So actually, if you try to analyze, you see, not in terms of major announcements, as you were talking correctly about talking about other issues which are there to the credit of this government. But he spoke about the process that is driving this government. As for example, he spoke about speed, gati, gati will give you pragati. So speed is important for such a big country as India. Unless you have speed, you have extent, you cannot actually deliver. As he spoke about, say, 60 years, you gave 15 crore gas connections. But in 60 weeks, we gave 4 crore gas connections. So that is the speed he's talking about. That is talking about sensitivity of the administration and accountability of the administration. And he's talking about the last man on the street. So if you try to analyze the policy making, which has been the major issues raised in social media as well, that how is the Prime Minister doing, what is the philosophy behind, then you'll find that this time he has spoken also about the philosophy and of course about the achievement. And sorry, I don't agree with you that it was Pakistan-centric in any way. Only towards the last part of his speech, a few minutes were given to Pakistan. But if you try to analyze, I don't agree with Mr. Tom Vadakkan that there is any problem in the foreign policy in terms of consistency. You see, when he became the Prime Minister, he referred about this in his speech, that he gave a call to all the South Asian countries. They were invited here because he wanted to see whether we can fight poverty together. And he blamed in Pakistan, you see the way he compared India's attitude towards terrorism, and he spoke about Peshawar killing of children and the attitude in India, Indian children, the way they behaved, like they sympathized with the children who were killed. And when something happens in Jammu and Kashmir, you are celebrating. So this contradiction, if you see in overall, it was also a speech against terrorism, and besides his focus on fighting poverty.
All right, but we're talking about two major points that could have been elaborated a little bit more. The big political unrest that are happening in the country, one, of course, in Kashmir, and the other in Gujarat, for that matter, the Dalit uprising. The fact that right now they've, in fact, reached Una today, where that incident had happened, that triggered that entire thing. In terms of addressing those concerns of the societal divisions that are there in India, do you think the Prime Minister said enough?
I don't think so, because much of the Prime Minister's speech was devoted to reaching out to the poor, to the middle classes, to the farm sector, and to the security forces. Now, these are the areas, these are the social groups the BJP is trying to reach. We all know the whole lot of elections are due this year, later, and next year. So that is only expected of the Prime Minister. And in order to raise issues, by raising issues that touch the people, he, weaved a, web of statistics, in which I thought the prime message which should have been there got obfuscated. And the prime message was in his passing reference to there being no strong India without a strong society. I personally feel that the Prime Minister at this juncture required to adumbrate, to explain more, to dwell more on this theme, because this theme is the need of the hour. But his references to what I just mentioned, and also to the unrest which is there, we are witnessing in Kashmir, and also vis-a-vis the Dalits, these references were generic. I think that the reference to Kashmir was a bit trite, was a bit short, and perhaps he could have imparted more balm or human touch to that than merely stating that the statist view, zero tolerance to violence and terrorism, and asking them to come and join the national mainstream in order to realize their parents' aspirations and all. Now, I think that, these references, which were per forma references, which were made in passing, could have been at the core of his address. But maybe the Prime Minister has his own understanding of the ground situation, both in terms of his political expediency and also in terms of India's threat perception or security perception. So sometimes we have to give the Prime Minister a benefit of doubt, but I certainly felt that such an eloquent Prime Minister was less than eloquent on key issues.
All right, Aditi, would you agree with that, that these were particular issues that could have been addressed, but given that the fact that the elections are due in a few states, including Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, where there were references to the issues that are there, for example, Uttar Pradesh about the sugarcane farmers. But in terms of the political context of the speech, would you agree with Vinod that some issues of social divisions that have emerged could have been addressed better?
Well, he did address social divisions, and he could have said more, maybe he didn't say more. What disappointed me a lot more was the fact that new things were not spelt out in this speech about bettering people's lives, about making people's lives easier. He talked about ease of business, he talked about issues relating to price rise. These are the things which are really bothering people. It's become extremely expensive for people to live now. And we were expecting to hear concrete rollout. This is the problem. I understand your pain, and I am going to do this to address this. So merely saying that more acreages come under pulses, and therefore the market will improve in the days to come, I think is not enough.
All right, Sudesh, would you agree on that? That there was a lot of passing references to a lot of issues, but in terms of new ideas.
Yes, on the contrary, I feel that if you see his focus on culture, he spoke about Indian culture, a civilization, the need for peace, and he also appealed to people to leave terrorism, leave the culture of the gun. He spoke about Kashmir terrorism, he spoke about Maoist terrorism, He spoke about all these things. It's not that, maybe there could be a feeling that he could have spoken more on Dalit issues. But if you see in the light of, he had already spoken about these issues outside and quite elaborately. And this Independence Day speech, in the beginning itself, he said that yes, the government has to list its achievement. This is the time to tell people what has been happening.
Right, but what about Aditi's point about new ideas or the lack of it in this speech?
No, I think it was perfect, because if you see the situation where the country is going and what is the vision that he is leading the country to, then you see it is a perfect match, it's a blend. If you talk about Balochistan as for example, that comes in the context of what is happening in the country and what Pakistan is doing. So everything was put in the context.
All right, Tom, I'm sure you have a differing point of view from Sudesh on that. But in terms of major misses, if you would like to say as the opposition or the Congress party, what would you point out in this speech?
Well, they talked about blending, what have you, and Dalits were mentioned. I heard the speech extensively, but the mention on Dalits was absolutely missing. You have a situation in his own state where the healing touch is required. You have a healing touch in Jammu and Kashmir. And today, the Chief Minister, who is supported by the Bharatiya Janata Party, has blamed the centre. This is a fallout of the speech. You have the Chief Justice of India. What does he say? He says justice. He's asking for justice. Have you heard a situation where the Chief Justice of this country is asking for justice? He wants more judges. Now, these are very unprecedented state of affairs. I think the Bharatiya Janata Party needs to address it because these are serious matters the country is going to ask. Speeches are made and speeches are forgotten. But this speech will be more remembered for the other speeches made by various other people. The price rise issue. It's a serious issue. We talked about inflation. And as to the question of statistics, I think Vinod was perfectly right. A lot of statistics. But what was hidden between the statistics was the sugarcane issue. The reality is they have not been paid still. Yep. And here's the Prime Minister from the ramparts of Red Fort saying that it's been all paid. I think he gave you a statistics of 99.5. Why is he misleading the nation? He's the Prime Minister of this country. He needs to tell the truth. That too from the ramparts of Red Fort. That's all what we're asking.
All right, Aditi, and that's a point that a few analysts have also made in my reading for this show. The fact that it was a lot of rhetoric, it was a lot of what has happened and what will happen has not been spelled out as much as the.
Some amount of rhetoric is unavoidable in an independence.
But is it
speech.
more an election-driven speech?
But I think that, for instance, to say that we have kept inflation below 6%. In a month where inflation has crossed 6.07% is, I think, a bit much. Similarly, I'm not at all sure how much he spoke at length about power. Now, I think it's going to be pretty cold comfort to people who still continue to get power for 6 hours a day. So all this business about LED bulbs and power reform and all this, the only takeaway that I got from this was that the power minister should look forward to better times.
All right, so actually then for the power minister, Sudesh, would you agree to that? That as far as a lot of policy initiatives are concerned, and you just talked about this, that you're saying that the new ideas were there, but a lot of analysts are pointing out that it wasn't that much. It was more a stock-taking exercise. How do we move forward? In terms of policy decisions, where do we see the government head on issues such as Kashmir, on the Dalit issues, on various other issues like price rise that the country is facing?
I'm sure you see, if you look at the overall picture, if you look at his speech, then he is basically trying to get rid among people, the impression that the impression created by people like Mr. Tom Vadakkan, who are in a position that this government is not performing. But if you have a series of performances, if you start listing even, for example, lead bulb, if you talk of power surplus status, if you talk of, say, 10,000 out of 18,000 villages electrified. So these things are concrete achievements. You cannot deny these things to the government. This will automatically go to the credit of the government. So it is necessary to bring the country out of whatever disillusionment
what about
there was.
statistics? The one that Aditi pointed out, that inflation, he's saying that inflation is below 6%. Inflation this month went to 6.07%.
No, it could be by a few points, that you cannot say, because when you are talking, actually, he's saying that 6, and he's also saying that RBI has been mandated to keep it 4 plus minus 2. So that is the goal of the government. that this is what we want. We don't want it to go to a double-digit inflation.
Right.
And if you talk of price rise, he spoke elaborately on price rise as well. So I feel that the parameters are correct. This is what he wanted to tell the government, tell the people of this country, that the faith they have reposed in this government, the faith is correct. And in less than 2.5 years, the half of the life of the government, a lot of things have been achieved. And in coming days, they should have all the hope that more things will be done.
All right, Tom, you wanted to respond, then I'll go to Vinod.
I'm surprised that my friend from the Bharatiya Janata Party is not feeling the pinch on the common man. Prices are soaring. You go to the marketplace and the Hasif will tell you what's the situation on the ground. And the ground situation is inflation has hit the roof. If the government does not read the writing on the wall, this is crisis in the making.
All right, and Vinod, it's a fair point. The fact that, as the Prime Minister wanted, a lot of messages came from the common public, and perhaps all these issues did come up in front of him, but did he address them in the manner that he is supposed to?
Well, Prime Minister spoke for 94 minutes. And much of those 94 minutes was spent on telling the people what he has done for them on the strength of statistics that he presented. Now, I quite agree that these statistics have to be verified on the ground, and it could be embarrassment if that verification turns negative. So, I think that the issues that needed greater focus, besides, of course, the issues touching the people, were wound up in less than 2 minutes at the fag end of the speech. That was the big letdown, because one sat through the statistics the Prime Minister reeled out. I sat through the entire speech, very attentively listening to what he was saying. And some of the things pleased me immensely. For instance, he referred to Nehru when he was on the freedom struggle narrative, which I thought was a good thing. He was criticizing the Congress party, the UPA government's performance, but within the permissible limits of democratic discourse. These were the highlights, the positives of the Prime Minister's speech. In my view, where the speech was short on my expectations, others couldn't have no expectations, may not have any expectations, was that I expected the Prime Minister to use the ramparts of the Red Fort to reach out robustly to all alienated sections of the Indian society, because by his own admission and by his own statement, India cannot be strong if the society remains divided. There is no amity in the society is not united. And he made some very nice parallels between ancient history, modern history, and the contemporaneous times, like talking about from Bhim to Ambedkar, Bhim to Bhimarao, from Vedas to something else, you know, in the sense it was something very good, you know. Vivekanand, from Vedas to Vivekanand. There were some silver linings to the speech, but, you know, it was very unlike Prime Minister that the speech was a bit zigzag, you know. He jumped from one issue to another and then came back to the same issue, and at the end of it, there wasn't a cogent narrative that one could take home. This is very, very rare. It doesn't happen with this Prime Minister. He's a very good speaker. One may question his statistics and his facts, but one cannot question him as his oratorical skills,
right.
you know. So, but here, even his oratorical skills, despite the long time he took in making his point, 94 minutes, no other Prime Minister in post-independence India has taken so long, dwelt on for so long, given such a long speech.
Right.
But a long speech is always welcome, so long as it is not short on ideas.
All right, Aditi, I'll give you the final word. Also, we'll start taking closing comments. But in terms of shift in policy, do we see any of that happening on any front, be it the economic or foreign policy?
On economic policy, I see a definite shift. For instance, the point that he made about BSNL, Air India having turned around. Now, this is going to sound extremely incredible to people who travel Air India. I mean, there is no evidence that Air India has turned around. Or people who use BSNL broadband services, there is no evidence that BSNL is more efficient today than it was day before yesterday. So, frankly, and to me, it sounded as if he is he is sounding the death knell of the entire strategic disinvestment program that he announced in his own budget earlier this year. So it's very strange.
All right, Vinod, very quickly.
Sorry, Aditi. This sounds, you see, the BJP has had an experience of exaggerated tall claims, short on facts, the India Shining campaign. India Shining became an irritant for the electorate, because, India wasn't shining and it was being claimed as shining. On these issues, and this happened recently in the Bihar elections, where the power situation had tangibly improved for the people, and the Prime Minister kept repeating, I don't know who was advising him, kept repeating at one rally after another, asking people, Bijli aayi? Right. I think that those who are giving the talking points to the Prime Minister need to brush up their data bank, need to do some due diligence before they put these things or put up the talking points for the Prime Minister to include in his speech, because he speaks extempore. So they have to be really doubly diligent in putting down the facts there, because a Prime Minister who speaks extempore has to be adequately supported by a research team.
All right. Tom and Sudesh, I'll give you 30 seconds each because we've run out of time. But Tom, final comments to you as well. Things to look forward to, or things you would want the Prime Minister to perhaps address in the coming days?
I'm sure the Prime Minister has his wisdom and he has a good team of advisors, but I would suggest that he should not repeat the speech at the ramparts, essentially because I saw some of his senior cabinet ministers taking a short nap. It should not work as a song for a short nap, because I think there was a whole hue and cry raised about some other issues earlier. So I think it's very important for the Prime Minister to maintain that spirit of his speech, which he has been giving elsewhere. Red Fort is a bad story.
All right, Sudesh, final word to you. I'm sure you would disagree with Tom, but what do we look forward to now?
You see, the whole focus needs to be understood in the right spirit. It is not Prime Minister has said that the government is in continuation. He has spoken about various programs that were initiated, but suddenly they did not find any ground. So he spoke about his job as a Prime Minister, and he tried to make a distinction that how is this government different? This government is different because it is more accountable. It is sensitive to people.
All right, but he didn't mention even about his programs, not
and
just
it is speed. So people want to know that how are you different? So Prime Minister was all throughout talking about the difference because of the approach of this government. And if you talk about the approach, then you will find that this government is working with the speed that this country needs.
All right, so it's more about the approach, little less in substance, as many have pointed out. But we'll have to see as far as how this changes policy in the coming days. Thank you very much, and a very happy Independence Day to all of you. And thank you so much for coming in on The Big Picture tonight. Well, that's it from us. Thanks so much for watching.